or national security. Brannon brings the issues of the day into clear focus through the lens of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon Howe.
And welcome to the broadcast on this Wednesday night, August 27th, 2025. Folks, I'm about to have on Patrick Wood. We are going to play a symposium that he conducted today, a roundtable conversation. I want him to introduce it for us. We grabbed it. He's been very generous to let us grab this roundtable conversation about what's happening in our country. Most people in America, folks, are not connecting the dots. We are already involved in an economic civil war. That's how I'm going to put it. We have a war going on between the Federal Reserve, the old system, and what is now the new system that seems to be in the process of being implemented. Stable coins, cryptocurrency, whatever you want to call it. President Donald Trump, like myself and like many of you, apparently is no fan of the Federal Reserve. And why would you be? It is something created in 1913. Remember, we did our interviews many times with G. Edward Griffin, the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. The Federal Reserve has destroyed the dollar. It has been a hidden tax on Americans. Remember John Maynard Keynes, who said, by this continuous process of inflation, we can destroy the majority of the people's wealth, and not one man in a million will know what we're doing. Folks, we're going to explain to you tonight and connect some dots. I'm not hearing a lot of what we're about to say tonight and what he and I talked about on radio today at 1 o'clock Central, 2 Eastern. I'm not hearing it in other places. I'm not seeing people connecting the dots like we are. Now, I am seeing a few people talk about some of these things, but they're not mainstream people. They're on conservative or politically conservative or just very astute podcast, TV or radio. You'll find them. But I don't know of anyone that's connecting the dots the way Patrick Wood and I are connecting the dots. We have a lot of theories, but I think they're playing out to become reality. We're going to show you, I believe tonight, the new system that's being set up. Because this debt-based system that we have, this fiat currency of the American dollar, well, it seems to have run its course. It's at the end. And President Trump had this dumped in his lap in this, his second term. But it happens to be individuals he's fighting, institutions he's fighting, that he doesn't, I don't think, like the Federal Reserve. I don't like them either. Even some of these big banks, I call them banksters. Some of them, by the way, aren't they the ones that make up the Federal Reserve? About a dozen banks given a federal charter under the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. And some of these banks, didn't they really go after Donald Trump and his businesses and his children running those businesses? Well, maybe it's payback time. You know, we've heard President Trump over the years talk about taking down your enemies. When someone picks a fight with you, you go all the way until you get rid of them, destroy them, do what you have to do to have victory. Is that what he's doing? I don't know. But I couldn't blame him, not after what they put him through. And I looked at the other day, all of his cases, where they're at. He still has a lot hanging over his head as far as monetary damages to his company, etc. Some of them are being waved away, but folks, there's still a lot left of these different cases. They came after him. Now maybe he's going after their system, which was coming to an end anyway. Something had to happen. And the Federal Reserve wanted to go to a central bank digital currency. President Trump says, no way. No way are you guys going to be empowered to keep going and destroying the country. So what option does he really have? His back is kind of to the wall. And what he seems to have done now is, well, joined up with some tech bros. And some of them are technocrats. Transhumanism, technocracy, big words. They're just going to use technology to govern things. I don't know how much President Trump even knows about technocracy. Maybe he just simply sees a lot of this as the alternative system to what we've been given. But remember, these banks, some of them, they're no friends of Donald Trump. Look at this. Trump. I have a tweet here. Let me see if I can find it. Talking about what they did with his banks. Here we go. It has just been revealed that JP Morgan and Bank of America debanked President Trump under pressure from the Biden administration over January 6th. Tens of millions of dollars in holdings removed from JP Morgan and denied entry into Bank of America. Comes as Trump is reportedly planning an executive order going after banks for this conduct. And then there's the Federal Reserve, which is bankrupt, broke. In fact, I've got a clip here from his own Treasury Secretary talking about how broke the Federal Reserve is. Listen to this.
The Fed is the house. It's a casino. The casino doesn't lose money. The players are the ones that lose money. And I'm not going to comment. I'm like you. I don't really understand what's going on with the size, the scope, the cost of the building renovations. One can ask, was it a good idea to start the renovations for an enterprise that's losing $100 billion a year? So $100 billion because of a mismatch in the bond portfolio from the short-term rates. And I think that the Fed should undertake an internal review because I think all the other operations are endangering its independence of monetary policy. As I've said, monetary policy should be kept independent. It's a jewel box, should be walled off. But by undertaking all these other activities, then you come in for criticism, just like you're seeing here, that might impinge on monetary independence.
So the Federal Reserve is in big trouble. $100 billion a year they're losing. We're at the end. People are losing trust in this dollar. They have expanded our balance sheet another $1 trillion just recently again. The dollar's going down. Gold and silver are going up. It's going to be the end of this dollar, one way or the other, folks. Now, we're getting into it. We got more clips to play. We got Patrick Wood here to introduce what he did this afternoon, which is a roundtable that he's given us permission to play. This is very important. You need to tweet, text, email, Facebook, Getter, True Social, whatever you do, get on the old phone if you have to. Say, go to worldviewtube.com right now. Brandon House, Patrick Wood, and a team of roundtable experts are about to explain to you, or as Ricky Ricardo would say, we're about to explain to you what's going on. And you're not going to hear this many places. I asked Logan today over lunch after we got off the air at 2 o'clock Central. Logan, are you hearing any other podcasts connect these dots? Are you hearing any other broadcasts connect these dots? He said, no. I'm only hearing a couple of them connect a couple of the dots. We're connecting a lot of dots. Look, people are going to have the opportunity to get ready and prepare for what's coming. Or they can just let it happen. But you might want to get ready so you can be a leader. Be someone who's emotionally and spiritually and financially prepared the best you can be to be a leader for what's coming to the country. Because it's going to be, I think, historic what's about to happen. So tweet, text, email, Facebook, Getter, True Social, whatever you've got. Get the word out. Get your friends and family over here. Here's another clip about how bad the Federal Reserve is doing and why this system is over. And President Trump is not letting these guys take over anymore. He's going to take away their power and he's going to implement a new system. The question is, what will the new system entail? Listen to this, because this is how bad the feds are in managing.
The US dollar is showing signs of weakness. It has lost over 10% of its value in the last 6 months. This is the dollar's worst performance in more than 50 years. The last time this happened was in 1973. And to add insult to injury, other currencies are appreciating. The euro, for instance, has gained by over 12%. The Swiss franc is up by more than 13%. The Japanese yen, nearly 8%. Even gold is outperforming the US dollar. Gold has gained 25% this year. Plus, riskier currencies are doing better than the US dollar, like Ghana's CD, the Taiwanese dollar, and Mexico's peso. They've all registered double-digit gains. So there's a clear shift Investors are moving away from the US dollar. They haven't dumped the American currency yet, but they're certainly diversifying. They're trying to lower the risk.
Yep, they're losing confidence in the American dollar. And now we're going to have stable coins, Bitcoins, and the Genius Act, and people can move money out of the banks. Woo, this is creating quite the opportunity for this new system. All seems to be coming together, doesn't it? But what does it mean for you? Now, today, I thought I had a pretty good, off-the-cuff, no teleprompter, because I don't use teleprompters, folks, except for the Worldview Report. I thought I had, if I may say so humbly, a pretty good opening monologue today. And I don't think there's any reason to repeat it here by me right now. I think what I should just do is play for you my monologue from radio and TV at 1 o'clock Central and then go right to Patrick Wood. This monologue, I think, helps you understand what I'm seeing, the dots I'm connecting, where I think it's going. Let's ask Patrick what he thinks and then get to this brand new roundtable conversation that just took place this afternoon with Patrick Wood and his guest, and he's being very kind to let us bring it to you tonight. But first, I hope you have tweet, text, email, Facebook, Getter, True Social. Tell your friends. This is cutting edge. I haven't even stopped to promote anything tonight. And yet we have to, we need to, because we have to pay the bills to keep this program going. But I'm just going to trust you to go to worldviewtube.com/sponsors and just do it. You know what I promote, what I use, Bella Grace, my Numi, my Gatatana. worldviewtube.com/sponsors. And while this monologue plays, pay attention, but also keep alerting more people to get over here. This is big news. This is breaking news. Watch my monologue from 1 o'clock Central today. President Trump, signed the Genius Act. And there seems to be a battle going on between the Federal Reserve. I mean, isn't it pretty clear, folks? President Trump is not a big fan of the Federal Reserve, certainly not this Federal Reserve. And he's even wanting to fire one of the Federal Reserve governors, I guess, who they say is involved in some kind of problem with mortgages. But there's clearly a war going on between the Federal Reserve and the Trump administration. And I believe that the tech bros, the technocrats, are wanting to replace the Federal Reserve. There's a big battle going on. Now, many of them, I think, want to go to digital currencies, stable coins, cryptocurrencies. And I believe that some of the things that have been done, like the Genius Act and others, are going to cause for there to be an outflow of deposits from banks. And then some of these banks are going to fail. And the more banks that fail, the more they can consolidate banks and then bring in this new system. Why is it so urgent to do this now? Because the dollar is a debt-based system and we are at the end of the line. It has been inflated away, the purchasing power. We also have the consumer is losing confidence in the system. And the consumers are out of credit, many of them. They're putting even groceries, we now are told, on credit. So people are going to need some way to tap into more credit and to keep this country going with a new system. That comes in, then comes in the tokenization of your mortgage. What if you have a mortgage, let's say, of $300,000? And let's say you have paid down that with only $100,000 left to go. That means you have around $200,000 in equity sitting in your house. What if you were offered the opportunity to tokenize that $200,000 and now it appears on your phone? In your own wallet, on your phone, and you can tap into that $200,000 whenever you want. Now, that's not a whole lot different than maybe what some of you have. Some of you may have a line of credit on your home, meaning you paid your house off, and you've kind of used your house like a bank. And you thought, well, I want to pay my house off. I don't want that interest payment. I don't want to pay all that. I want to go right to principal. So I'll pay it off. But then I'll get a line of credit against it. So if there's an emergency, I can just tap into it. And I think most times that interest is tax deductible. And maybe you have that line of credit on your house that's paid off, which, by the way, I looked up the other day, 38% of Americans have their homes paid off. 38%. That's something like 80 million household. So they have that line of credit. They never use it. They never use it, but it's there. But they're responsible people, right? Why are they responsible? What's the proof of that? Well, they paid their house off, didn't they? They didn't go for a second and third mortgage. So they're responsible people that worked hard, delayed gratification, didn't go on cruises and trips and golf courses. And, a lot of them maybe did without a lot of that because they wanted to pay their house off and have that insurance, really, of knowing, hey, I've got my house paid off. No matter what, at least I got a place to live. And so they're disciplined people. So for them to have a line of credit against their house is really not a big deal because they've already proven they're very responsible people, and they're probably not prone to ever using that line of credit. It's just there if there's an emergency to tap into that equity. Now, would the average American be disciplined like that? No, because the average American doesn't have their house paid off. And so if they were offered the opportunity to tap into whatever equity they have, and now it's on their phone, how many of them would be prone to have compulsive behavior in purchases? How is this setting up for you? By 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy? At what point do people tap into their equity? They no longer own that home. They're now a renter. Now, I think the system is on the verge of collapse. That's just my personal observation based on watching the Feds. How many of you know that the Federal Reserve is billions and billions and billions of dollars in debt? The whole system seems to be at the end. We've got to go to a new system. Donald Trump had all of this handed to him, this mess, since 1913 accumulating. Now he's got to figure out what to do. And here come the tech bros. And they have a new system. And I'm certainly no fan of the Federal Reserve. But what is this new system going to do? How is it going to impact you, me? Now, what are all these National Guard troops really about? Is that really about crime in those cities? Why didn't he do that in his first term? Is that really about crime, or is it more than just about crime? Is it about crime, but it's also conditioning the American people to put National Guard troops in major cities? Because when this system collapses, when the consumer no longer trusts this dollar-based debt system, and we possibly go to a hyperinflation type of depression, if they cannot manage the crash well, how do you think the average inner city is going to respond? What about the people who are in our country who are the agitators, the Marxists? You're hearing talk today, are you not, about George Soros, Donald Trump talking about George Soros and what should happen to him. Wasn't he saying something about racketeering or RICO or something? There seems to be the Marxists want the whole system to burn to the ground. Now Stephen Miller with the White House has said, look, the Democrat Party is nothing but a cabal, an organized crime syndicate, basically. So the Marxists are trying to burn the system down, and you can't let a good crisis go to waste. And the technocrats are coming in to try to save the day, do away with the old system, and implement a new system. Isn't that what Peter Thiel of Palantir told us? The choice is between Antichrist and Armageddon, or maybe there's a third way, a third option. What are all these Alligator Alley and other temporary, very quickly thrown up jails? What are they? Is that really about illegal immigrants and parking them there so they can come out of the country? Maybe it is, but maybe just like putting the National Guard on the streets is about getting rid of crime, but it's really also about getting our troops and country and people ready for what's coming. Maybe those jails are also for the illegal immigrants, but they can be used when we need them to round up the domestic enemies, the Marxists, the anarchists. I just think there's too much going on here, folks. You got to connect the dots. There's too much going on. And why would we have the Genius Act signed that seems, from all my research now that I've been doing on this, to allow money to flow out of bank deposits and into crypto, Bitcoin, stable coins? Isn't that just inviting a bank run when deposits dip too low? And is that part of this war on the Fed to implement a new system? Is there an economic civil war going on in America? I think there is. And very few people are talking about it, nor understand how to prepare for it. I'm not here to give financial advice. I give financial opinion and analysis. But there is an economic war going on internationally, but there's one going on domestically. And most Americans are not seeing these signs. They see them for what they're told they are, but when was the last time the government told you the truth? Just call them stable coins. How stable are they, folks? How stable are they? All the names really hide and mask the truth. You have to ask questions. Question authority, as the old bumper sticker says. You got to be connecting the dots and saying, is this really about what they tell me it's about, or is there something bigger going on here? And we're going to get into all that with Patrick Wood. And where else are you going to hear this? Joining me now is Patrick Wood of Technocracy.news, Technocracy.news. Patrick had this great roundtable conversation this afternoon that we're about to play. He's here to help us set it up. Patrick, thank you for doing this. Thank you for being so gracious to let us play it tonight. What do you make of my opening monologue, which you also heard at 1 o'clock today for radio and TV? The dots seem to be connecting, don't they? There is an economic civil war on, and I don't think most Americans know there's an economic civil war going on between the Trump administration and the Fed and the old system and the new system that's coming in.
Exactly right. There's an economic system that's being birthed right before our eyes. We don't know all the details yet, but it's going to be a big thing. Trump calls it his golden age. Other people have called it, well, I call it technocracy, but that's me. But the idea at this point that, yes, there is a war being waged against the Federal Reserve. Is it real? Is it substantive?
Is it theater? Is it theater?
There's so much theater going on all over the place. You can't believe it. There's propaganda everywhere in sight. We're trying. What we want to do is figure. We want to cut through the propaganda and give answers for people. That was our intention with this roundtable in the first place. And we just have a discussion at this point. So this is on the minds of people all over America at this point. And they need to hear other people, experts, talking about it in a sensible, rational way to lay out all the facts before them and let them make up their own mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you and I talked today about the fact that maybe what will entice people is when the dollar is not buying what it used to, it's been inflated, you can afford groceries, your utility bills, thanks to AI data centers, have gone nuts, your health insurance has spiked, your homeowner's insurance has spiked, your automobile insurance has spiked, everything's going up on us, right? Some people are buying groceries on credit, right?
Yes.
That people will be willing to go into the new system voluntarily when you offer to say, as I said on radio today, if you have a home that's worth $300,000 and you've paid down $200,000 of your mortgage, so you only owe $100,000. That means you have $200,000 in equity in your house, and you're going to be able to tokenize it. They're going to tokenize it and put it onto an app on your phone, and you're going to be able to use it and buy stuff with it. Maybe take that cruise you wanted to take, or maybe just pay your medical bills, pay your groceries, pay your property tax, whatever. Some people are going to say, I have no choice do
Yes.
it. Others will say, I want to do it. I got $400,000 in my house. I'd like to go ahead and tap it at the end of my life. Kind of a reverse mortgage. You see those commercials for a reverse mortgage? There may not be a lot of, you and I found out that 38% of Americans have their house paid for. About 80 million households. 38% have their house paid for. Well, they can tap into that with a line of credit, or they could tokenize it onto an app on their phone and start buying stuff right off their phone when they go to the store. This will lure many people in our consumer-based society to go ahead and do that, which maybe by 2030 you'll own nothing and be happy, is because you will have gone into that system willingly or out of necessity, and you will be turning the mortgage of your house over to someone else, and you won't really own it. You'll just be renting it, right?
That's right. That's right. That's the whole idea behind you will own nothing by 2030 and you'll be happy. I don't know about happy. Well, some people might be happy to get rid of their home now and cash out their equity. A lot of people can't sell their house because of market conditions, et cetera. They can't, and they also can't sell their house because rent would be much more than their house payment is right now. So a lot of people will be happy. Maybe they get out of their house. They can rent. They can go anywhere they want to go at that point. A lot of young people, they don't want to own in a house anyway, and they're living in apartments or tiny houses or whatever, tiny townhouses. So this whole thing has been set up at this point to replace our debt-based system, economic system that depends on private property altogether, with another type of an economic system that's an asset-based economic system. This is the upshot, I believe, of our conversation that we had today. Do we have to have more conversations? Yes, we do, because we're just kind of figuring this out as we go. But all the signs are there that this is happening. That's my point. All of the signs, and in public records as well. People like Scott Besson, but been talking about this. The Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, he's been talking about this. So this is not just out of the blue. We're not just spinning this as a conspiracy theory for sure. Maybe they have a conspiracy, but we don't. We're just trying to figure out what the heck they're doing.
Yeah. Look at a couple articles before we go to this roundtable you did this afternoon. Genius Act sparks fears of bank deposit outflows to crypto. Okay, so the Genius Act that President Trump signed is in a way waging a war against the banks. Some of these banks I don't think he's too fond of, who didn't treat him too well with deep banking we read a while ago. So now you can pull money out of the bank, put them into these cryptos, stable coins, Bitcoin, whatever. This is going to cause outflows from the banks. The American people don't trust these banks, most of them. They're losing confidence in the dollar. So they pull their money, their deposits out of these banks. Now, in a banking system based on fractional reserve banking, you take $1 in and loan out 90 cents, hold 10 cents. Some of these banks, they're going to be in big trouble. Maybe this is going to be the tipping point that causes some of these banks to go belly up and wave the white flag or be taken over. Now you have fewer banks to roll into the new system. But this article here at the Bit Journal, again, Genius Act sparks fears of bank deposits outflow to crypto. The Genius Act was introduced to regulate $288 billion stable coin market. Okay, but they go on to talk about what some of the scenarios could be. Banks are worried that crypto exchanges could entice bank depositors as they get higher returns, right? The situation has paralleled that in the 70s and early 80s when money market funds increased at a faster rate than bank deposits, causing panic and putting the health of the banking system in doubt. And then you've got bank runs scenarios, people worrying about bank runs. Again, I would say President Trump, again, he's kind of an Andrew Jackson type figure who hated the idea of the central bank, did away with it, got censured for it, warned us never to do it again from my great state of Tennessee. I've been to the Hermitage. It's an awesome place to go visit, by the way. Andrew Jackson, I liked him in a lot of ways, that's for sure. And there's a lot of similarities between him and President Trump. And I think he's got Jackson hanging back in his Oval Office again like he did in the first term. So President Trump's kind of going to war with the banks the way Jackson did and the central bank, is he not?
It seems so, but we have to remember on the other side of this, there's another system being born right before our eyes. It's not everybody knows at this point debt is over. Everybody understands, I think, that we can't live this way anymore. For instance, buying groceries with credit cards, that doesn't work long term. So something has to happen to get rid of the debt load all over the country, not just national debt, but for people as well. All the people who owe money on their student loans, all the people that are upside down in credit card debt, et cetera. So at this point, what will this new system look like? Will it look like a dystopian technocracy? Or is something else in play? Somehow, they can maybe extend the life of capitalism, but capitalism depends upon private property. If you don't have enough private property in the system, the whole system is going to collapse on itself. So, at this point, we see this. This is one conclusion I think we're firm on. We see this bridge from the debt-based system to the asset-based system. We see the bridge being made with the stable coins that are going to be pegged to the dollar, 1 for 1 to the dollar. And when that crutch is removed, eventually, when we just have stable coins as payment systems, then the dollar will be irrelevant. It'll be like it won't be needed at all. But in the meantime, there's so much confusion going on right now. Is the dollar going away, or isn't it going away? Well, we're just about to find out. Probably
I think
in the
it's
next 6
going away.
months.
I think it's going away. Don't you?
I do in the end. And like I said, the bridge to make that happen is by bringing in the crutch, if you will, of stable coins, pegging it 1 to 1 on the dollar, and then letting that ride for a while, and then it will be removed altogether from that peg.
A stable coin, like a Bitcoin.
Well, Bitcoin is not the same thing as a stable coin.
What's the difference?
Well, the difference is that Bitcoin can fluctuate wildly with the market. Stable coins are pegged 1 to 1, like they're stable in sense of the value. Well, there's no value in the dollar anyway. That's kind of silly in a way, right? But the stable coins are designed to be a payment system. That's all.
Okay, like
PayPal was
Wall Street reacts to Genius Act as stablecoin market eyes $2 trillion growth. The U.S. passes the Genius Act, setting clear stablecoin regulations that could give $2 trillion growth, boost adoption, and reshape Wall Street's future. And it goes on to talk about how some of these companies are now going to be launching their own stable coins. I think you're probably going to end up seeing like an Amazon stable coin, maybe some of the big box stores, maybe Target will have their own stable coin, right?
And it won't matter either. The way they design this, it doesn't matter. The payment system that will be in place, stable coin is stable coin. It doesn't matter who issues it. But on the other side of that, Brandon, is this business of an asset-based token. This is not a payment token. An asset-based token is what's in view when, for instance, Howard Lutnick lusts over the resources of the United States, like the 580 million acres that the United States owns with all the mineral rights. He's looking forward to digitizing all of these assets of the United States into tokens.
And then put those onto our ledger that makes our $37 trillion look like, nothing compared to the trillions and hundreds and hundreds of trillions of dollars in hard assets, lands, mineral. And this is now President Trump buying up a 10% stake in Intel, which he says he's not done doing. I reported in the Worldview Report tonight, Donald Trump saying, quote, "I paid $0 for Intel. It's worth approximately $11 billion. All goes to the USA. Why are stupid people unhappy with that? I will make deals like that for our country all day." I will also help the companies that make such lucrative deals with the United States. I love seeing their stock price go up, making the USA richer and richer, more jobs for America. Who would not want to make a deal like that, end quote. So now he's going to buy up corporations, which I think is kind of getting to a corporate fascist, big government, big business merging, the government picking winners and losers. I mean, I wish somebody would come over here and tell me, hey, we'll buy into your business too. Not that I want them to get involved with me, but nobody's doing that, right? So I know I got to let you go, but let me show you one other article. Wall Street banking giant JP Morgan is teaming with crypto exchange Coinbase to roll out a series of integrations aimed at making it easier for the bank's 80 million customers to buy crypto. So part of the concern here, in closing with you, before we go to this roundtable, is that you could see a gigantic sucking sound coming out of these banks, and their deposits are gone. How are they going to stay afloat? They're not. And then you're going to have fewer banks, and then fewer banks to roll into the new system. Exactly. Yeah, we've seen this consolidation over the last two financial meltdowns, 2000, then in 2008. There was a huge consolidation of banks, and this will continue. At this time, could be curtains for the independent banking system in America. All right. Thank you for letting us play this great roundtable you did this afternoon at technocracy.news, technocracy.news, and his show is here Tuesday and Thursdays with Logan House, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. Thank you, Patrick. You bet. Thank you. Look at this headline, folks, where we go to this roundtable. Genius Act revives Civil War era bank problem for states. Pretty interesting, right? Goes on to talk about how in a single word buried in the definition of person in the recently enacted Genius Act has opened what may be the most significant loophole in modern financial regulation. Change originally other entity in S394 and now other business entity in the enrolled S1582, that's the legislation, appears to exempt state governments from the sweeping federal oversight that governs private stablecoin users or issuers under the Genius Act. The implications are staggering. Are you guys paying attention? Don't let your eyes roll back in your head. While private companies face a gauntlet of federal licensing requirements, 100% high-quality reserve mandates, monthly attestations, and criminal penalties for issuing digital dollars, state governments can launch competing stable coins with minimal federal oversight. It's a regulatory arbitrage that could reshape U.S. monetary policy and resurrect echoes of the chaotic wildcat banking era. Wyoming is the first to exploit this loophole. Then it goes on to talk about other states doing it. So now Nebraska is getting in on it. It creates dual track system. Private issuers face bank-like supervision while state issuers operate outside that framework. This resembles the era of 1837 to 1865 when states chartered banks with minimal oversight, leading to the chaotic patchwork of banknotes and widespread failures until the National Banking Act of 1863 imposed federal control and uniform currency. So there's so much going on, and most people are not paying attention. Look at these articles. We've got so many of them today. These are all linked over at worldviewreport.com, by the way, your daily aggregated news site, worldviewreport.com, because we're connecting dots like very few people are doing. This is very important. I also expect at some point, President Trump will continue to do executive orders, and he may have to implement emergency rules related to a financial crisis. I'm not convinced that the troops on the street in American cities is just about crime. I think it's about crime, but I also think it's about conditioning the American people for National Guard on the streets of major cities, should there not be a soft landing into the new system. If you have a few days or a few weeks before the new system's up and running, and I don't know what kind of pain there would be as this old system collapses, Could it be hyperinflation, shortages, bank runs, lots of upset people, people that can't afford basics and groceries and rioting? Then you have all the troublemakers in the country. So are these National Guard troops about just the crime now, or conditioning the American people to get used to this because President Trump and his team sees that this whole system we have now is collapsing and there's going to be some pain? I don't know. I'm just connecting the dots because we're seeing things we haven't seen in this country, well, as we just saw from one of those articles, in a long time. And some of it we've never seen. And now you have President Trump's own, what is he, the White House assistant chief of staff, whatever his title is, Stephen Miller, declaring that the Democrat Party is now basically an extremist party. They're rigging elections, many believe. Is President Trump preparing the American people for a whole new system and waging war at the same time against those people that tried throwing him in jail, destroying his family, destroying his businesses, but who've also, in many regards, been destroying our American cities with these blue mayors, destroying American cities and businesses? I like to see justice. I like to see a fair, legitimate, free market system. Yes. But the question is, will they destroy the old system that needs to be destroyed and replace it with something that's really freer, or just technocracy, technology that controls us in every move we make? And while you may say, I could live like that under Donald Trump because I don't think he'll abuse it. Yeah, but what if the system gets put in place and the next president is Gavin Newsom? You see? Is this really not something like what the Antichrist will use and exploit at a greater level? But what is President Trump's plan when it comes to elections even, midterms? Listen to what Stephen Miller had to say before we begin. We're going to go to this roundtable, but I'm setting the stage, folks, for how important this is. Listen.
Look, we discussed this last time I was on your show. The Democrat Party does not fight for, care about, or represent American citizens. It is an entity devoted exclusively to the defense of hardened criminals, gangbangers, and illegal alien killers and terrorists. The Democrat Party is not a political party. It is a domestic extremist organization. Look at Chicago. They've shut down the police department. They've handcuffed law enforcement, and as President Trump says, they have turned the streets of Chicago into a bloody killing field. Here in Washington, D.C., before President Trump launched the federal law enforcement liberation in D.C., there was a murder on the streets of this town every other day. Body after body after body after body. That was Washington, D.C. Residents were afraid to go to restaurants. They were afraid to go into entire neighborhoods. They were getting carjacked right and left, robbed and beaten. That was Washington, D.C. Now we're 2 weeks homicide free, the safest this city has ever been in its entire history. And the Democrats, instead of jumping up and down and saying, thank you, President Trump, thank you for saving our lives, thank you for saving our cities, thank you for scrubbing away all the graffiti, the trash, the homeless encampments, the druggies, instead of cleaning up the city, instead of thanking him for that, they're saying, President Trump, how dare you save our lives? How dare you save our children? How dare you save our city? The Democrat Party, Sean, that exists today, it disgusts me. I do not recognize that party, Sean.
So where is this going again? Are there dots to be connected? Even the building of all of these tent cities for supposedly illegal immigrants. Is that really about illegal immigrants, as I said earlier? Or is it about illegal immigrants plus using them to deal with really domestic terrorists, treasonous individuals? You did hear what Tulsi Gabbard said yesterday in the cabinet room, right? about the intelligence arena, which I think has weaponized many of our financial institutions and been using money, dark money that's come off the books. There's trillions of dollars missing from the federal government. Trillions of your money missing, gone, can't be accounted for. Who's got it? I would say the intelligence arena has it. And they're running dark ops and a shadow government. Think President Trump knows this? I'm pretty sure he does. Is again, this part of destroying their system that's enslaved the American people since 1913 and merged the economics with the military industrial complex and the intelligence arena and the banksters and the media. Now he's calling for major licensing fees for the fake news media, maybe even loss of their licenses. He's going to war with all of these people that went to war with him. I don't blame him. But maybe this really isn't about Trump. Maybe it's about us, the country. He's just willing to take them on. I'm loving watching it. But what I want to make sure is I'm aware of what's going to replace the old system. Are we going to go from the frying pan to the fire? But let's go back to the intelligence arena. I think they've been involved in a lot of the shenanigans and the fraud. Listen to this from Tulsi Gabbard.
Mr. President, you have charged me with the mission of finding the truth and telling the truth to the American people. And we've exposed some of the worst examples of the weaponization of intelligence in the last several weeks. I will continue down that mission and that path wherever it leads. Transparency, telling the truth is what will drive true accountability for the American people who deserve nothing less. And lastly, Mr. President, all of us are charged with being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. I've gone through a reorganization for ODNI that we've announced in the last week. We've cut nearly half of redundant, unnecessary functions within ODNI, saving taxpayers over $700 million a year. We will continue focusing on our core mission in keeping the American people safe and appreciate your leadership and your focus on this most critical task.
And you've also found many bags of information. I think they call them burn bags. They're supposed to be burned and they didn't get burned, having to do with how corrupt the 2020 election was. And when will that all come out?
Mr. President, I will be the first to brief you once we have that information collected. But you're right, we are finding documents literally tucked away in the back of safes in random offices in these bags and in other areas, which again speaks to the intent of those who are trying to hide the truth from the American people and trying to cover up the politicization that was led by people like John Brennan and James Clapper and others that have caused really immeasurable harm to the American people and to our country.
Great job. Thank you.
All right, so there you go. We can connect the dots, I think, here, folks, from the financial market, the banks, the Federal Reserve, the intelligence arena, the media, the agitators, the Democrat Party. That old system worked in tandem. In this new system, it's going to perhaps defang a lot of them. But I have to ask, is the devil you know better than the devil you don't know? What is this new system going to really look like? So with that, I want to roll to this roundtable from this afternoon on this. I'm going to come in and break in a few times, but otherwise we're going to let it run. But folks, we can't do this without your support, okay? We need your support at worldviewfoundation.com to push out free programming like this, okay? I can't say it any stronger. You see all of the content at Worldview Tube, all of it, watching it, free, on demand, every day, content. But at some point, when we put out all of this great spread, this meal, we need someone to help us pay for it. Worldviewfoundation.com. If you are sponsoring us with your contributions, thank you. We really appreciate it. If you're not, would you consider prayerfully doing so? Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. Now, don't forget our national conference is coming up Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. We've added in Byron Stinson, who's gotten the 5 red heifers to Israel. What a story. It's controversial, no doubt about it. It's global. In fact, those red heifers may have something to do with why Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. Regardless of whether you agree or disagree with this, it's a topic you want to discuss, you want to hear about, because it's happening. And it does seem to fit in with their desire to have a temporary tabernacle or a temple, but they first have to have the cleansing process, the purification ceremony. They need a perfect red heifer, the ashes mixed with water, per Numbers chapter 19. Again, you don't have to agree with any of this to want to hear about it, to know that it's happening. They're pushing for it. It's a global thing. It could even cause World War III, some people are saying. I'm not kidding. He's going to be with us in the building, along with all these other great speakers, Gordon Chang, Sidney Powell, Chris Martinson, the lead pollster at Rasmussen, Mark Mitchell, and many more. Our 22nd annual National Worldview Weekend. Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. Full details, get your tickets, worldviewstore.com. If you have a year membership to the Vault, you can live stream it. Or monthly, $9.99. If you have a membership at any level, right, Logan? A membership at any level. I thought we were going to let people stream it that a year membership. Okay, well, he just overruled me. I guess that's why he's the vice president of operations. He says, no, let's let everybody stream it. Okay, well, don't just get the 1 month membership and then cancel it. Don't be cheap like that. I don't think most of you will. Okay, that's not good. So get a membership, however you get it, and you can live stream it. Worldview Vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault. But we'd much rather have you in person to meet these speakers, visit with them, and for us to see you in person. It really encourages us to do that, to see you in person. All right, worldviewtube.com/vault or worldviewstore.com to get your tickets and be with us in person. All right, let's go to a break, and then we're going to come right back to this roundtable.
Introducing the Sentry Wellness System, the ultimate under-sink water treatment solution designed with you in mind. Say goodbye to harmful toxins and hello to water enriched with essential nutrients like calcium and magnesium. Enjoy the benefits of increased pH for on-demand alkalinity, all from a zero-waste system that fits seamlessly into your home. Installation is a breeze, taking just 15 minutes, so you can have clean, healthy, great-tasting water straight from your tap. Perfect for apartments, homes, rentals, and even RVs. Elevate your hydration and well-being with the Sentry Wellness System because you deserve the best in every drop.
Sentry H2O. Tap into wellness.
Introduction. He is the OG technocrat expert who has been warning us for decades and has been educating all of us. So Patrick Wood, give us a little introduction and then we'll go around to everyone.
Sounds good. I'm so glad that we're having this roundtable. This has been waiting to happen, I think, for a long time. People around the country are scratching their heads right now. What is going on? Nothing makes sense. We're going to try to make sense tonight for sure. But I just have to joke a little bit. The introduction slide of our podcast today, it depicts the round table, right? We're the knights of the round table. This is kind of appropriate in a way. Okay, it's kind of silly, but you know, who's going to stand up for America at this point? If it's not us, I mean, anybody else could have done this, but we're doing it at this point. So let the discussion begin on technocracy. We need to unpack so many things, and I don't have all answers. Honestly, I don't. But there's so many things in the wind right now. A new financial system is on the horizon. Perhaps the death of a dollar at some point in the future. Maybe we're looking at something like a flip-flop from a debt-based system over to an asset-based system. And you know, what does this mean for Americans? Well, there's going to be some radical changes in the future. And hopefully we're going to have some answers for people and for ourselves as well. So I say, let the discussion begin.
Absolutely. Yeah, Aaron, give us a little introduction.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, I'm very excited to be here and very honored to be on with this incredible panel. Once I learned about technocracy, and it's only really been about 3 years, I realized that it's the biggest single threat really to free will. And I learned about technocracy from Patrick, so it is truly wonderful to be on. I will say that this is truly the battle of our lifetime, and most people are fundamentally unaware of it. Most people don't know what technocracy is. A lot of people confuse technocracy with technology. And what's gone on since the election has been, in my opinion, a hyper acceleration of technocracy. I think it's advanced 5 years in the last 6 or 7 months. And so from my perspective, the most important thing that we can do is warn people about it. And so that's what I've been doing nonstop for the past 3 years and will continue to do so.
Thank you. And Craig Winklewood.
Yeah. Also honored as well. I saw Courtney doing a show with Harrison Smith on InfoWars at one point, and she was talking about natural asset corporations, and that was really, I've been watching this for a long time. So I come from a market background, and so I've watched, I focus on currency markets, debt markets, stock market, energy markets, commodity markets, and so I've been doing that for 30 plus years. And when I watched what went down with the natural asset corporations, that whole situation, it's like that was our own New York Stock Exchange. That was our own Securities Exchange Commission. That was our own institutions that were, working hand in hand with the technocracy. And that was, I was concerned before that, but that really set me off. And that's why I reached out to Courtney, and then we developed a relationship, and then, Aaron and so forth. And Aaron's focused around the crypto, the digital space, and now the technocracy. And so I've been watching things unfold over the last 30 plus years in the financial markets. And so, that's kind of my angle on things. And hopefully I can interject some things this evening in terms of, again, currency, debt, energy, and, stocks. Again, assets, right? We can get into all these different things: private equity, private credit, public debt. All these different things. There's so many different ways of looking at this. And I think there's a big transfer about to take place here. I felt this feeling in 2019 before the repo crisis, and that's what they used to set the stage for COVID. It was this inversion of the yield curve, and they had to come in. The Treasury had to come in. The Federal Reserve had to come in. I'm just feeling like we're in that same kind of a spot, like something's about to hit. So hopefully we can touch on that a little bit. But if not, there's plenty of opportunities to do that in future shows as well. So that's my background.
Great.
Awesome. I think we should start with, I'm guessing that most of the audience is familiar, but for those who aren't, let's do a little bit of an introduction to what is technocracy. I'm always surprised at how few people are familiar with the term and even know what it means. As Aaron said, a lot of people confuse it with technology. I've gotten a lot of pushback recently with some of my writing telling me that I'm opposed to technology, and why would I be opposed to something that could help humanity? Just to clarify, I am not at all opposed to technology. I'm obviously using it to talk to these incredible, brilliant minds and collaborate. So that is quite a gift. So I'm not opposed to technology. I'm opposed to technocracy, which I do think is really putting the free will of humanity, as Aaron said, in jeopardy. And I believe that without the free will, humans cease to be. We cease to exist as humans. And they keep talking about humanity 2.0. I think they mean it. They want a new version of humanity. And I'd like to preserve humanity 1.0. I know we're flawed with all of our foibles, but I'm in favor of keeping that one intact. So let's start with, what is technocracy? Who wants to jump in on that?
I'll jump in. This is the official definition from technocracy in the 1930s, and it's still relevant today. You'll see when I just tell you what it says. This is a direct quote from the magazine called The Technocrat in 1937. Technocracy is the science of social engineering. That's first off. Are we being socially engineered these days? Holy mackerel, we're all over the place. But I continue. The scientific operation of this entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population. For the first time in the human history, it'll be done as a scientific, technical, engineering problem. Then it goes on. It says there will be no place for politics, politicians, finance, or financiers. That also includes rackets or racketeers Technocracy will distribute by means of a certificate of distribution available to every citizen from birth to death. Well, when you unpack that just a little bit, you'll see this is a total flip-flop away from capitalism and free market economics. And when Technocracy was first created at Columbia University, no less, by scientists and engineers, they reasoned that we did not need private property at all. They would abscond with all private property and put it into a global common trust for them to use to make goods and services for us to consume. They will decide, they said at the time, they will be the one who decides how much, what your share of the continental wealth would be. I guarantee you wouldn't like it either. You would not be happy about it. So this was a crazy idea that was made by officials, scientists, engineers, top people in that day at Columbia University. Well, whatever came out of Columbia that we liked in the first place, but that's another issue. This was the seat of progressivism at the time, and this system persisted actively for at least 15 or 20 years. The American public saw through it at some point, and they rejected the whole thing out of hand. They saw where it was headed. It would have been the collapse of everything we had up at that point. No free market economics, no capitalism, no way to accumulate wealth for inheritance or just for our own savings when we're old or whatever. And the American people saw through this, and they said, we're not going to go for this. So you guys just go home and take your bags with you. Well, fast forward, this is the same plan we have. The attacks on property rights along the way has been epic. We see the Trilateral Commission got after private property in the 1973. You had with their land use of land policies that they established. Agenda 21 came along with the United Nations saying the same thing. We have to get rid of private property. We see today the attack on private property is just epic at this point. So Technocracy had an agenda in the beginning. They didn't have the technology to do it, fortunately, at that time. Now they do. They've matured. Their whole strategy is now centered around, especially AI. That's the basic tool they have today. And at this point, we have to ask the question: Have their reasons and rationale had changed? Has it been changed over the last 100 years? I say they have not changed, and I think we can conclude, if we look what's going on today versus what they said back then, and the things that they said in the meantime, we can conclude it seems to be the same plan at this point. The only question is, do they have the chutzpah to pull it off? Because I think probably all the requirements are met at this point. Will they pull the trigger and actually get it done this time? This is the risk. This is kind of an existential risk to America for sure, because we can't survive without private property and everything that goes with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else want to chime in on that?
Sure. I mean, I would just say that I agree with what Patrick said 100%. And it's amazing that they came up with this idea in the 1930s and actually had the foresight to basically be where we are right now, because they are truly moving forward on the exact same game plan, which the basis of it is to switch from the price and demand system, from a price-based system, supply and demand system, to an energy credit-based system, which is exactly where everything is headed. And Elon Musk is really the embodiment of trying to sell the vision of technocracy. His grandfather was the head of the Technocracy party in Canada, but to see how clearly Musk is pushing technocracy, this was a comment that he made on X just 3 days ago. There will be universal high income, not merely basic income. Everyone will have the best medical care, food, home, transport, and everything else. Sustainable abundance. And if you read, Musk has actually talked several times and tweeted about Mars being a technocracy. He's talked about the importance of UBI. He's talked about the importance of energy credits. If you look at what X is, it is essentially the basis for the Chinese social credit system. He's building it as an everything app, which will have an identity system. It will have X payments, which my guess will be a stable coin or CBDC platform, and a social credit system all built into one. So not only are the technocrats going on the original plan, they absolutely have the technology, and Musk grew up kind of with technocracy is his blueprint.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, Josh Hadelman, who is Elon Musk's grandfather, he was the head of Technocracy Inc. in Canada from 1936 to 1941, right before they kind of shut it down. And he left that party. He was run out, and then he was part of this. It was called the Social Credit Party, and it was in Canada. That's actually what it's called, the Social Credit Party. So I absolutely, Musk has carried this on, this talk about the UBI. I think what's really important for people to understand is that it will not be a universal basic income. That's what they call it. It's going to be conditionally based. Right, social credit. A lot of people are familiar with social credit system in China, and it is conditionally based. Right, if you're a good doobie, you comply with all of their laws, their programs, their social etiquette. Then you might get your tokens, and if you don't, or you'll get access to various places. You'll get rewarded. If you don't, you get demerits. And with a tokenized economy, that's much easier to implement and execute. So people need to understand that I think a lot of people hear UBI, and some people may think it sounds wonderful. Had actually shared with me this with Rickards, this infomercial, and the way they present it is like there's going to be all this plush money, and of course they didn't say that it would be doled out like the analogy they were using were the during that sea illness, the checks that were rolled out, that it wouldn't be like that. But I think people have an idea of UBI or some sort of a blanket kind of coverage as being very utopian, idyllic, but they don't look at the other side of it, which is that it will be conditional. It's not going to be, just a free for all and here's your allotment. It's not like an allowance, or maybe it is like an allowance. Like when you're a kid, you get an allowance, and if you're good and you get good grades and you clean your room, you may even get a bonus. And if you're not, then you're not going to get anything at all. So maybe think of it that way.
Well, and the other thing too, let me add in there, I think this is on a lot of people's minds. It's always on my mind, is that I think this is also a battle between good and evil. And so, we think back and, they're going to sell it to us so it looks really good, and the other thing, and back to these natural asset corporations, they were trying to slide this through while you were with your family at the holidays, right, a couple years ago. So again, these people will sell you all kinds of stuff, and then, they'll make it sound really good. But this is really like Marxism, right, where they're taking away your God-given rights, your God-given strengths, your God-given abilities, right? And it's also a little bit, going back to 1930s, like Aaron said, you start to get into these things like the Kalergi plan, right? Where Codenville-Kalergi conspiracy, where this Austrian Japanese politician, right? He was the first to talk about kind of this master race thing. And I think that's kind of where these people are headed with this technocracy too, because again, somebody's it's kind of like, there can be only one, right? And these people think that they can be the one, and that that they can create some sort of, orchestrated thing with the world. It just doesn't work like that. And so again, I think these technocrats have learned through history, right? They've pushed history, they've pushed these wealth and power transfers, and I'll leave it at that. I just think that they're going to sell this to look good, like Aaron said, right? The Elon Musk tweet, and it's not, and we that's our job, is to dig underneath the surface here and really try to peel this thing back so we can see what's really going on.
Yeah. Absolutely. I do think I agree. It's definitely a battle between good and evil. I do think a lot of this, I talk a lot about the spiritual kind of side of it. And I know back then, at the time when official Technocracy Inc., they weren't very concerned with religion or spirituality. But certainly today, I think they're merging this, right? Patrick talks a lot about the three-legged stool. And I think those who've read my Phoenix Conspiracy article, I really outlined that there. We've got all three lined up. But I do think that the spiritual component is so integral because I call it the technological immunization of the eschaton. It's really this notion of creating a simulacra here on Earth, right? And that's very essential to this technocratic and transhuman, of course, agenda. They're trying to recreate or bring about what they think is going to be heaven on earth. I think it's going to be a dystopia, but they're doing it through. A lot of them try to convince us that we're already in a simulation. I don't believe that that's true, but they're doing that. By bringing about a simulation, it's really a simulacra. So everything is a image of reality, but it is not the real thing. It's a technological, right? The digital twins is a really great of that. So I think something I would love to cover for people. I know all of you are pretty knowledgeable in this arena. So we can get different takes on this, but I don't know that people really understand what tokenization is. And I think tokenization is a huge part of both the incoming financial system as well as really being able to execute technocracy. Once they have a tokenized economy, they can, I forgot the acronym, but it was Acolum Labs that was supposedly a leak. And they had these letters for like the stratification of this tokenized society. I don't know if it was really a true leak or if it was a fictional story they concocted. Either way, I don't think it's relevant. They put a lot of details on a lot of names in it. So, it's very likely that it could have been disinformation. But the metaphor, I think, was very valuable. What they were really talking about is how you would have a stratified society that was tokenized, and you would have these classes where certain people would be allotted a bigger allowance and others would be on a lower scale, and that certain people would also be given more privileges and more permissions. So they may not have to comply with certain parameters in order to still have their tokens and have them roll over to the next month. I'm putting it in the hypothetical. I don't know what the actual structure is, but this is how they laid it out. And and I think it's a pretty good, model for what they'd like to foment and what they'd like to bring to fruition. So, but I don't think that people really know what tokenization is. So if anybody wants to give their insights on that, chime in.
Go for it, Aaron.
Sure. So I'm actually writing a book. I'm writing a book on this. I actually like to say it's about freedom versus technocracy. It's about free will, and the battleground is actually tokenization. And tokenization isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's kind of like AI isn't necessarily a bad thing, or things that are digital technology isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on the implementation of it. But I will talk about what the implementation looks like from the perspective of a technocrat, and you can see this in terms of how CBDCs work or stablecoins work. And so how this relates to tokenization is CBDCs or stablecoins are just a digital token that represents a dollar. That's the simplest way, or whatever the currency happens to be. But in the technocratic version of this, there are some features about these tokens that are alarming. They can be centrally controlled and issued. They can be programmed. They can be tracked. And they can be censored. So this is the thing that people talk about being worried about when they look at CBDCs and stablecoins. Stablecoins can already be frozen and stopped, but they're not just stopping at tokenizing money. They literally want to tokenize every asset on Earth. They want to tokenize stocks, bonds, commodities, everything that you can imagine they want to tokenize. So in a future model where you have a social credit system, they can not only stop, for instance, you from using your money if they don't like your behavior, they can actually stop you from moving any of your assets or even potentially using your assets. I mean, imagine we're pushed forward where you can only use an electric car, and that there's a token representing that car that could actually be shut off remotely. That's essentially what they're working towards. And so this is why people should be worried about tokenization. There are implementations of tokens where they're private and they're encrypted and you have them in your own self-custody, which is why I say tokenization isn't necessarily a bad thing. But we should be very concerned because privacy tokens and things like Zano are very rare. Most of what's being pushed out right now, for instance, with stable coins through the Genius Act or coming up the Clarity Act, are all of these centralized versions of tokens that are controlled by these third parties and managed by these third parties. So it is really the platform by which they implement technocracy. The one thing I want to add to that is they've been making changes legally over the last several decades. I've actually created a website on this. It's not ready for prime time yet, but essentially we've been signing these click wrap agreements, these long agreements every time you use a service, or actually anything at this point, whether it's a bank account, a brokerage account, a gym membership. We're used to and we're trained to basically scroll to the bottom, these 30, 50-page documents, and just click accept. Well, when you actually do read these contracts, which it would be impossible to do, it would take at least an hour a day, 365 days a year, what you'll find is we've already given away contractually our privacy, our rights to ownership of our own information. And in some cases, we've even given away our economic interest in certain assets like 401ks and others in the event of a bankruptcy. So they've already laid the groundwork for technocracy legally. Tokenization just takes it to that next level by making it something that they can shift ownership and control with the click of a mouse button.
Yeah. Hey, can you make the distinction for us between payment tokens versus asset-based tokens? And what's the mechanism for switching back and forth?
Well, it depends on, there isn't necessarily a technical difference at all. It depends on how you're implementing it technically, but a token is a token from an issuance perspective. The government has different definitions now that they're trying to make for how they treat something that's a payment token. For instance, a stable coin that's used for actually buying and selling items kind of as a replacement for cash versus a token that represents a stock or a commodity. And so the main difference is legal, in terms of regulatory, but from a technical perspective, there isn't a difference. They're issued in the same way.
So a payment token, like one that's tethered to the dollar, if you will, 1-to-1, the same definition wouldn't apply for an asset-based token that would represent anything that might float in value, for instance.
Correct. And in fact, the Genius Act covers these payment tokens or stable coins. And then there's something called the Clarity Act, which passed the House but hasn't been signed into law yet. And there are different rules and regulations. So you'll have the SEC applying all of their guidelines to any token that represents a security. And then you will have the CFTC involved with regulating tokens that represent commodities. Now, the one thing that you'll find is we are already heavily regulated. So one thing that I want to say about tokenization is that people don't realize how much financial surveillance we already have. There's this misunderstanding that somehow we actually already have freedom. Our money is already digital. The Federal Reserve uses an Oracle database. Most of our transactions are digital. The money that we use today is already programmable and censorable, not as much as it will be under this tokenization scheme. So tokenization just adds more to this. But I identified 13 different federal programs that are involved in regulating money. Everything ranging from NSA bulk data collection of our financial transactions to the IRS working with your bank using AI to analyze your transactions, to the Bank Secrecy Act, the Patriot Act. The list goes on and on. We are already financially surveilled. And now they're applying all of that to digital tokens, which is going to give them more instantaneous control over all of our assets.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that as much as they may already have the capacity to surveil, and we were talking about this earlier, but I think the problem is that now they're going to convince people that they don't own anything, but they're, in debt on things that they don't own, and that they'll somehow wipe that out. But what people won't recognize, or I'm hoping we can shine light on this, is that there's still equity that people can leverage. But when you tokenize, you don't have equity. They seize the assets. So even though, like, I think a good example might be land, right? If somebody owns their home, now, unless you have a land patent, you still pay taxes. So you're essentially renting it from the government, right? You're leasing your property from the government. But you still have equity that you could leverage. And that is actually what most people in this country do for small businesses. If you take away that ability to have leverage for equity, you're going to eliminate most of the small business capacity in this country, which I think would be devastating. But it's very much aligned with their plans to put everything into the big corporations, the conglomerates, the public-private partnerships with the NGOs, and it's very conducive to technocracy. So what are your thoughts on that? That's the big kind of shift that I see, because I agree with you. I think, we don't own a lot of what we think we own already. I mean, the property is just one example. Craig could probably speak to the markets, and, people can get certificates. Most people don't. So they don't own most of their stocks either. And the list goes on and on. But I think the big shift that they're trying to do with this tokenization is it's in the equity that they're going to seize.
Yeah. Well, let me add real quickly. So let's just talk about currency for a second. So really what a currency is it's really just, its ability for people to transact within a boundary, right? So, the US has a dollar, Great Britain has the British pound, the euro has the euro currency, right? That's an aggregation of a lot of different countries, one common currency, all floating separate debt. So now we start to get into currency, right? All it really is a pass through. Someone gets money, they go out, they buy a farm, they buy some groceries, they buy a car, whatever. And then that farm goes up in value. They turn around, they sell it, they convert it to dollars, and then they move it to something else. Well, then we start to get all kinds of debt, right? So we get federal government debt, we get local municipal debt, we get student debt, car debt, home debt, family household debt, all that kind of stuff. So, we look at this situation with currency and debt, right? And this kind of plays into these, how are we going to go from a world that's so awash in debt? I mean, the world it's just like almost not even imagine, how much debt there is out there in the system. And then we get into derivatives, and everybody's kind of managing these derivatives. And we hear President Trump right now talking about trying to lower the interest rate and going after the Federal Reserve and the whole Federal Reserve apparatus. We've seen this really going on for about 4 to 6 weeks, where it's just this constant attack on Jerome Powell. Then on, I'm drawing a blank with her name. But anyway, the most recent one, so we've had multiple attacks. And so what they're doing is they're really trying to go after this apparatus, the Federal Reserve, that monitors this whole global central bank thing, right? Where money comes from, kind of where it originates, how it moves around the world, and really who controls it, right? That's the real key. Now we get into things like inflation and deflation, and what's going to make a currency ultimately change from a U.S. dollar-based world. Really the dollar is the world reserve currency of the world. Last year we saw this big thing with BRICS coming in: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They really tried to make a push with that and try to put commodities behind it. But it really flopped, right? And it flopped for a lot of reasons, because none of those currencies are trustworthy. Why is that? The U.S. is the most productive country in the world, right? And so it's like the gem on the hill, right? The shining beacon on the hill. And so, again, that's what makes the dollar the world reserve currency. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is this, that, as soon as we move away from this situation where we have a currency that represents a boundary or a culture or a geographic productivity of a people, right? Then all of a sudden we tear down all the boundaries and it's a free for all, and that's what this looks like these technocrats want, right? They want to implode the system, okay? And then they get a free for all, right? Because then everything's up for grabs, and it's easy for them because they already have, like Aaron said, they already have the databases in place. They're already transacting. They're already monitoring all this stuff. So I think that the thing that I want to say is we can look at these things like, again, back to that Kalergi. Read up if you can on this Kalergi guy, okay? Because he kind of spearheaded this whole European experiment in a lot of different ways, back before World War II, tipping off Hitler, right? Power, wealth transfer. And then we get into this whole situation where, the euro has to create this common currency, but they never create a common debt. So that system's going to blow up, right? We know that there's going to be a sovereign debt crisis somewhere that's going to kick this off. Could be in Japan, could be in China, could be in Europe. And the key is, what can we do about it, right? How can we get out front of this so that we don't get caught in this situation? And Aaron and I have had a lot of conversations about this. Again, our founding fathers knew something, and it still holds true today. You got to bring it back to local, because if you let this stay at the top level, federal level, global level, whatever, it's going to unravel and it's going to be a free-for-all. If you can bring it back to the local level, and you can get privacy and you can actually transact and have, trustworthy transactions again with some form of currency. Doesn't matter whether it's wampum, doesn't matter whether it's tree bark, doesn't matter whether it's tokenization, doesn't matter what it is, right? It just has to be trustworthy and transactable. People have to understand that they can move their things, their effort through that currency into an asset, back out of that asset, back into their hands to do something else with it.
All right, guys, I'm going to break in here. We're going to go right back to this. But first, I got to do the commercials. I got to raise some money, folks, so we can keep pushing all this out for free. Please don't forget about all of our great products at worldviewtube.com/sponsors, worldviewtube.com/sponsors. I swish with it every day. It's called Numi. It's got glutathione in it to detox your cells and remove the toxins from your cells. And some studies show may remove mercury from your brain, helping prevent Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. I drink the Gatatana every day. That is the phytoplankton that goes right to the cellular level to feed your mitochondria and boost your own immune system, so your own immune system can do what God intended for it to do, fight off the bad stuff, including the big C word, right? Bella Grace, I take that every day. Come back to this. I hate to do this, but look at my hair. Folks, I have more hair than I've had in years. And I got done getting ready today, and I said, look, I didn't have this hair 2 years ago. I started taking Bella Grace December of 2023, and the hair growth, even the hair growth has come down on my forehead. That's all new hair, okay? All of that, the line has moved down, okay? So, guys, if you want to live with thinning hair, have at it. Maybe it doesn't bother you guys. But ladies, I know you don't want to have thinning hair. And I'm telling you, the hair growth has been remarkable. Now, I do think it has been the combination of the Bella Grace, then the Numi, because the Bella Grace and the Gatatana, because when you feed your body at the cellular level, obviously you're boosting your health, and the healthier you are, I think good nutrition plays into hair growth. And I think there's doctors I've heard talk about that. So I do think it's the Bella Grace with the collagen, no doubt about it. And this collagen, 95% you absorb versus flush, according to the studies, 80 clinical trials behind it. But it's amazing stuff. My hands don't crack and bleed. They bled and cracked for years. So clearly I had a leaky gut. This high-end collagen healed my gut, because your gut lining is made of collagen. So I take these every day. The Numi, the Gatatana, the Bella Grace. And have the Worldview vitamins with our brand new pack. This is a super antioxidant pack that includes, by the way, broccoli, which is super powerful for fighting the big C, cancer. Okay? All of these are there. Worldview Talk, get your own satellite phone, solar generator, bulletproof backpack, and so much more. And yes, our national conference is coming up. Logan, we have Byron. He's going to speak for us. The man that took the 5 red heifers to Israel. He'll be live in the building. It's amazing. And apparently we decided tonight, if you join the vault at any level, monthly or yearly, we're going to let you stream it. Okay, not just yearly. You can even do the monthly thing. But you not only can stream it, you get access to 35 years of my radio shows, TV shows, ebooks, audiobooks, and pretty soon we're rolling out our brand new database, online Bible and Worldview software. You're going to be able to do Worldview and Bible software study on our new software we're launching very soon. Okay? It'll all be a part of your membership. Plus, you get the live stream special events like this. Also, coming up, I believe it's October 9th, Logan, that October 9th is when Catherine Austin Fitz will be in studio. I think that's October 9th. My day book here. Yep. And if you're a Vault member, you're going to be able to live stream it. You're going to be able to live stream it if you're a Vault member, okay? So again, lots of reasons to join the vault. All right.
Yeah, so I did look it up. I found it. And I do think it's hypothetical, but what it was CSRQ, and an acronym stands for Common, Sovereign, Restricted, and Quarantined. And so the model was essentially that you'd have like the common, right? That's the masses, and they're going to be on that very conditional, UBI. Then you have the sovereign, and they have slightly more privileges. And then there was the restricted, and the restricted were the way they described it. I mean, I'm not going to mention the names they named because I do think it was a disinfo op. But the model, I think, is very much what the elites would like to have if they could have their technocratic, they think utopia, I think dystopia. But it would be restricted. So the restricted are kind of like the very high level power influence operators who've been given privileges as long as they do their task. And then you have the quarantined, which are the people who are outside of the system. Essentially, they have unlimited tokens, they have assets, they it's like the ultimate hypocrisy with people like Al Gore, who scream about the climate crisis, but he can fly all over the world in his fancy jet because he has so many carbon credits. So I just wanted to clarify that for people. But also talking about you were talking about the currency. I think that, it really doesn't matter what it is. And you were talking about how, it could be, it's about the model, not about like, the physical currency itself. But you were talking about how our founding fathers really knew something. And I think this is such an important point because I think that really, I keep going back to the Declaration of Independence. A lot of people, have lost hope in the Constitution. That's, another conversation we can have. It's certainly been trampled on extensively. However, I think that the Declaration of Independence was the first document, and I would argue really the only in history, that has codified in writing this notion. And it's a very profound ontological truth that we were endowed with inalienable rights, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and from our Creator. And this is really, it's rooted in a very profound philosophical concept that, encompasses what it means to be human. And I think that when people are talking about, I hear a lot of discussion around property rights as a bulwark against technocracy. I unfortunately very much disagree. Property rights, while I absolutely support people defending their property, I think property rights are absolutely important. And I'm not at all saying that people should, just let that go. However, property rights are predicated on contract law. And contract law is, it's really essentially constructivism. So it's not, and again, I'm not negating the value of contract law, but it is not the same as inalienable rights. But inalienable rights, I think, are our greatest defense against this technocratic takeover. And I think that that's something we really need to shore up and strengthen. And I think so much of our education system has done everything possible to erode people's understanding of our history and have an understanding of those philosophical underpinnings which our history was founded upon. And I do think that that was by design. Our founding fathers talked about the importance of an educated citizenry. And it wasn't because they wanted people, only the elite, to be able to vote or have a say, and to be citizens. That wasn't why. It was because it was predicated on this experiment of self-governance. But they understood that in order to self-govern, you had to understand some of these philosophical, truths. Really, you had to be rooted in, and they believed, obviously, the First Amendment is the freedom of religion. So it didn't necessarily have to subscribe to one religion, but there was a metaphysical reality that you had to have an understanding of in order to be able to self-govern in a way that was a defense against tyranny. So I think that's just a really important thing that I'm in the process of working on, drafting up some material for people to try and clarify it in more simple terms, because I know when I start talking philosophy, sometimes people gloss over, but I really think it is so incredibly important because they're using everything that we think is our defense, they're actually using against us to funnel us into the technocracy. So
Let me just make one comment on that. I read the declaration just today, just to make sure
great.
that I understood it. Okay.
Yes.
And I had to memorize this in grade school. I remember the whole thing, and I remember doing it, but we only memorized the first part, like the declaration. But when you look at all of the things they're complaining about, all the things that were sticking in their craw, if you will, we see the same things happening today with these technocrats when they're stomping us in the ground. You could relabel or repurpose all of those things that I think there's at least 50 of them, and it's like, holy mackerel, this is like not modern commentary. And if somehow we could have our own great reset, not the progressives' great reset, but if we had our own great reset, we would have to go behind the Constitution, because at this point, this document has been rendered null and void. Not by us for sure, but in the way they've trampled the whole thing underfoot. At this point, our last document that we have before that was a Declaration of Independence, and this probably is a good place for us to start at this point to understand what we can do.
Yeah, and what always strikes me when I read this, I have done some speeches where I, quote from obviously the, part we are endowed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. My, how that has been lost. That's my own commentary. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the rights of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them they shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments as long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to rights themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. They go on and on, but the next line, they say, but when a long train of abuses and usurpation, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpation, all having indirect object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. And then it goes on. It's much longer, and it's where everybody should refresh themselves if they're not, familiar, if it's been a while. But what strikes me every time I read this is how many times the word usurpations is used, and I feel like that's what we're going through right now. Like as you said, Pat, I absolutely agree. It could be modern day. This is really what we're living through. And I do think it's incumbent upon us, if we do have any semblance of self-governance, but also I think as a bulwark against the technocracy, we do need to revert to this. People need to have a strong understanding of the principles upon which this was founded in order to reinforce it.
It was interesting to me that Tucson, Arizona, which is one of the most liberal cities in the country, I think, especially in Arizona, this is where Mark Kelly comes from, and it's a horrible city, in my opinion, as far as the politics is concerned. However, their city council just unanimously turned away the application for a major data center, AI data center in their city. and they said, we're not going to do this. We don't have the water, we don't have the power or whatever. And they had a unanimous vote, and it was a beautiful thing to see. If a city like that can do it under pressure from their citizens, just to think what you could do in your city if you could get everybody on board.
Yeah,
it'd be a wonderful thing.
Yeah, they're not going to give us a chance to vote. We have to take the chance to vote. We have to go and grab it. They're not going to give us a chance to vote on data centers or no data centers. And it's going to test the riparian rights. It's like the water stuff that's coming up, right? And we've been through that. I mean, you go through the Midwest and you get farmers, and there's been battles and court fights years after years of water. Well, we're not even, if we don't take this chance, we're not going to get that vote. And farmers are just going to be out of luck. There will be no water. You know what I mean? And they'll drain the aquifers. They don't care, so. But one of the things I wanted to add is we can't forget, though, that, Washington also, to pay the army, right? I mean, he did usurp a bunch of land in the Ohio Valley, right? So he marched in there, took a bunch of land. He knew it because he was a surveyor. So he knew how to access it and get front run it. And then he also took it to pay back to officers and so forth to fight against, the tyranny. So I guess keeping that in mind, I know people always trash the dollar, and I know that and I'm a huge proponent of the dollar because since the 2008 real estate crisis, the dollar's actually been in an uptrend, and people hate me for that, right? They're like, oh no, the dollar's garbage, right? It's whatever. The point is, it's been in an uptrend for 17 years, right? 17 or 18 years. If you look at it from 2008, there's no doubt about it. Now, the reason I bring this up is this, because this is, I think, one of our ways out. The dollar goes up. That's deflationary. What does deflation mean? That means that the everyday working person, their hour of effort goes further. Okay, they can buy more things. They can do more things, right? They get more for their hour. If we get inflation, that means a dollar going down. Okay, dollar goes down, we get inflation. Guess who loves that, right? The globalists, the elites, the technocrats, all them, because they have their hands on all the buttons and they can control things. They love it because it's not just one type of inflation. There's currency inflation, asset inflation, demand inflation, right? There's all these different types of inflation. And I really think that a dollar will fail, right? I'm thinking it could fail on the upside, right? And that's good for us because it takes the power, the assets, the strength out of the hands of the elites, puts it in the hand of the working class, right? As we go into this transition, I mean, the dollar will fail. I mean, Aaron can tell you, anybody who studied any fiat currency, it will fail in time, right? Ultimately, they all fail because they devalue them, they cheat, right? I mean, that's what government does, right? They cheat. And so they slide, they make it look like it's silver, but it's not silver anymore. So again, that's the upside to this, is that if the dollar can fail on the upside, okay, that puts a little bit of power and a little bit of juice, a little bit of tailwind at our back. It takes the assets out of the hands of the elites, puts the power back in the hands of us, the working class, right? The workers who work every hour and they try to make that go distance. Problem is we've got, this inflation, and that's what we're trying to fight against. So I just wanted to throw that stuff in there because I think hopefully that leads us. I know Pat sent out a couple notes, and I just wanted to make sure that, hopefully that directs us in the direction of some of these things that he wanted to cover. Does that make sense? Any thoughts on that, Pat? You want to respond on that?
Well, no, I like what you're saying, and we have so many insurmountable issues. I think with technocracy at this point, what the technocrats are doing to us right now, right before our eyes, the solutions are going to be hard to come by on a local basis, even. But we have to try. That's the only place we can put a firewall around our home, our community, and stuff like that. Because states won't do this. Certainly, the national government won't do it either. But your local officials, your entities, the city entities around America, they're the last word on sovereignty. Period. And that's my opinion. And if you can control that narrative and your city council, whatever, you can have a great place to live and well, for instance, in Arizona right now, we have the legal right to use gold and silver as currency. If a town in Arizona at that point said, you know what, we're going to ditch all this nonsense with stable coins or whatever, and we're going to do transaction business now with gold and silver, it could happen in a heartbeat. But will anybody do it? Will they see the light, why they need to do it? Our role at this point is to try to wake people up that these people are not playing games with us anymore. And they're dead serious about sacking the whole country. It's inconceivable to me. It boggles my mind how big of a heist this would be if somehow they can snatch it away from us when we're not looking. And there's lots of reasons that we're not looking. If they could snatch all of these assets away from us, it'll be the biggest heist in history. And I have to say, stealing land is really hard. The only way you can do it is by eminent domain. And otherwise, maybe you can steal a title or something. But otherwise, you can't steal land. It's very, very hard. But if you can tokenize the land,
yep.
Holy mackerel, that now it's in a digital form, it's easy to steal everything at that point. And if you think that BlackRock will not be interested in getting all those tokens in their portfolio, you're smoking something wrong here with you know? And so we all these sharks running around in Washington, D.C., and like Larry Fink now just nominated to be the co-leader of the World Economic Forum. You can't get rid of these people, but on the other hand, they seem to be intent on executing this huge heist of all assets in the world. How can we prevent them from doing that? Well, I'm not sure yet. Local is important, really important for us. Yeah. I don't know how it's going to play how it will play out otherwise.
Well, local is very important, but one of the things I want to lead this to you, Aaron, if I can, like so Aaron and I were talking the other day about, Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's is big, I mean, we see all these firms piling in, right? They're using it to manage their treasury and their corporation. They're trying to get people to buy it. BlackRock's got wrappers on it, right? The ETF. They're trying to get everybody to go into this. Same thing's going on with private equity, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in this private equity space. And I wish I had the charts to show this, but the point is, like, there's a lot of money tied up in private equity, and there's a lot of money tied up, in this Bitcoin thing and in the crypto space, okay? And Aaron can really he was talking about this the other day, and I asked him if he could kind of go through this, and we're talking, and I'm going to try to lead into that in the sense that the big thing for me is this, that, these, again, back to these currencies. And if we can bring it back to the local level is for sure the key. The biggest fear I have is that why don't you just talk about this, Aaron, and then I'll come back in. So explain what you mean, like Bitcoin's been hijacked, okay? And we see like this Strive, okay? It's a company in Ohio, and we have this guy, Mike, I think it's Mike Cole. Anyway, it was funded by Peter Thiel and JD Vance, right? And Lonsdale, right, of Palantir. They fund this thing, and they're also funding a bank in Columbus, Ohio, right? And so it's very concerning to me, the things that are going on in Ohio. We also see these big data centers going on. There's a lot of things happening in Ohio other than Arizona, right? I think you must be in Arizona, Pat. But in Ohio, there's a lot of things happening here, and it's sort of under the whole auspice that, Ramaswamy is going to get voted in as governor, and maybe they can run cover for a lot of this stuff. So again, Aaron, if you could talk about that a little bit.
Aaron,
unless you have something, Courtney.
I'm going to interject with one thing before you run with this, Aaron. This will add to it. But two comments I wanted to make on what Pat was saying. One is when you're talking about, this, essentially they're creating the technique. It's not just here, right? The heist. This is the AI action plan talks about making this essentially the technique for the world. Our companies are going to roll out the technocracy all over the world. So it'll be the blueprint, and it'll also be we're outsourcing all the tools for them to use. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. But also in speaking to this tokenization of the land, I had done a big post about my home county. I grew up in Bergen County, which is also actually, interestingly enough, where the Finks are from. But they have partnered up. There's a new technology. It's called Balcony, and they're the leader in blockchain-based land record management. And it is, I looked it up just to make sure I didn't get it wrong, but I do remember it. It's 370,000 property deeds that are on the chain already, which is the equivalent of $240 billion that they are already doing. So this is already like land and homes that are already on the blockchain. And of course, BlackRock is also talking about tokenizing every single asset possible. They're talking about bonds, they're talking about funds, they're talking about real estate. So I think it is interesting that their county, I don't know if they still live there, but is kind of leading the way on this. So yeah, you take it away, Aaron. Just wanted to add that.
Well, I don't even know where to start. Actually, I have so much to comment on with this. The first thing I think I want to say is that, I think we need to be open to a variety of different solutions. I mean, the technocracy is a monolith, and I agree. They're moving towards, the way I try to describe technocracy is imagine one global currency that's backed by energy credits, where the 17 sustainable development goals of the UN are the elements of a social credit system that's tied to that energy credit-based currency. That's kind of how I look at it. And clearly, this is the direction that it's going in. I think that on the currency front, I mean, this is why I'm a big proponent of alternative currencies. I like privacy coins, but I also like, things like gold and silver. So I'm not for any one maximalist position where you just pick one thing. However, one area that I've been going down, and I have the site, I haven't even released it yet, but I guess I'll talk about it here today, freedomforge.io. And the whole point of this is it's basically an incubator to create solutions to the technocratic programs that are being rolled out. So if you go to freedomforge.io, I'm sure there can be a lot of problems with this site. So again, it's like pre-alpha release, but it says they're building chains, we're forging freedom. Everything will be tokenized. The question is technocracy or freedom. Freedom Forge prototypes, incubates, and invests in non-custodial Xano-based counters. And to give you an example, there's a threats page where it's, okay, what's the threat? The threat is CBDCs and regulated stablecoins. What's the counter? Something like Freedom Dollar, which is a privacy-backed stablecoin. What is the threat? Public health tyranny. What is the counter? A global P2P healthcare marketplace where people outside of insurance, outside of the entire system, essentially a global medical tourism marketplace that's completely private. And so the whole idea here is to incubate a whole variety of projects, not just me incubate. I want to get this information out so anybody can build it, but to start explaining to people what the technocratic threat is so that maybe it stimulates them to build some of these solutions. And these solutions can be used locally, but they can also be used globally. So for instance, I think it would be helpful if farmers could have an online marketplace where they could sell their goods, not just locally, but they could sell their goods anywhere. It's a great way to kind of accelerate this. And so I just wanted to bring that up because this is one of the areas that I've been spending quite a bit of time on. And I feel a tremendous sense of urgency, by the way, because they are proceeding at warp speed on tokenization.
Yep.
Courtney, you're exactly right. I mean, with the Clarity Act, Larry Fink has been talking about this. And, if you think that a tokenized 401k or stock is going to reduce BlackRock's control or power, you're mistaken. It's going to have the same programmability as CBDCs or stable coins. As to the Bitcoin, there's it's a long story, so I won't go through all of it. I do recommend that you read the book Hijacking Bitcoin. But Bitcoin, in theory, originally started out to be something that you used as peer-to-peer cash for daily transactions. It was created to be something to stop the boom and bust cycle of fiat currencies. So you use it for day-to-day payments. It was supposed to be low fees, high transaction volume. Anyone, anywhere in the world could use Bitcoin without needing permission. That was the original vision. And most people don't understand or know that was the original vision. It was something that was supposed to compete with Visa and MasterCard right out of the gate. And it was hobbled and intentionally hijacked between 2015 and 2017. And so now you have this model where people refer to it as digital gold. Nobody ever talks about using Bitcoin anymore for day-to-day transactions. And I like to say there was kind of a technocratic takeover of Bitcoin. They added this cap and trade system where they limited the amount of transactions that can be done to 7 transactions per second, and then increased the fee. So it's kind of like the way carbon credits work. And the people that pushed that had ties to The Bilderberg Group had ties to traditional finance, had ties to the intelligence agencies, and MIT, which had funding from Jeffrey Epstein. When you really dig into this, it's kind of a nightmare as to what's happened. So there are people out there now thinking and still saying, well, Bitcoin is freedom money. And in reality, it is now just I call it hijacked digital surveillance gold, because all of the Bitcoin transactions are on a public ledger, which means they can be tracked, and they are being tracked. There's a company called Chainalysis that maps out everyone's transactions. I've had this year 3 separate people come to me that either had a divorce or a business dispute, and they were in a situation where the counterparty hired a private investigator who's now trained in this Chainalysis. So they were able to get more transaction history through Bitcoin than they are from a bank, which typically only holds these records for 7 years. So it's this digital surveillance gold. But on top of that, the big reason people are plowing all this money into it is that they've bought this idea that there will only be 21 million Bitcoin, and that it's scarce, and that's what makes it incredibly valuable. And it turns out this is also not true. And I don't want to go into spend a lot of time on this or a lot of the technical aspects of this, but the way Bitcoin works is every 10 minutes, computers around the world are solving math problems. The first computer to solve a math problem gets a reward called a block reward, and then gets all of the fees for the transactions that are added in that 10-minute block. Now, these rewards started out at 50 Bitcoin per 10 minutes, and then every 4 years it gets cut in half. The whole point of the block reward was to be an incentive for computers to secure the network until the transaction volume was enough that miners could make money just on transaction volume. So the whole purpose of Bitcoin, the economic structure, was based on a large volume of transactions and on miners making money based on transaction fees. Because it's been artificially capped at 7 transactions per second, miners make almost nothing actually mining on transaction fees. They are basically banking on the continued increase in the price of Bitcoin. It's completely speculative. So you have people spending $50, $100, $150 million building these mining facilities, using all of this electricity, speculating on whether or not they can solve a math puzzle. That's essentially what's going on now. And because of this rush to AI, the electricity costs are going to increase in the United States to such a degree that miners are not going to be able to mine competitively relative to other places in the world. So the entire premise is blown away. And because of this, once miners start going under and you have this issue with not enough computers actually trying to solve these problems, they're going to increase the supply above 21 million so that to provide extra incentives for the miners. So long story short, the scarcity 21 million argument is false. They're going to have to change it. They're going to have to increase the number of coins. And this is something that they've been talking about for years. And it's in the risk factors of BlackRock ETFs and other documents.
And the reason I wanted Aaron to talk about that is because I think they're setting the stage for an exit strategy. Okay, you see strategy with Michael Saylor, Mara Holdings, 21 Capital with this guy Jack Mallers, right? Riot Platforms, Trump Media and Tech Group Corp, right? These guys are holding all like 15 to 20. I mean, strategy holds like 628,000 Bitcoin, right? And so the key is if they can pull people in and they're creating these, esoteric strategies behind it. Again, we talk about this great taking. What better way to get people on this technocratic platform than to take everything they have, right? So again, we talk about this great taking, some event, and we think, oh, come on, they can't do that. Well, they shut the world down for like 2 weeks to 4 weeks during COVID, maybe even longer, depending upon how you want to measure it. Again, some sort of again, I talked about this in 2019 when the repo crisis, right? It set the stage for them to rip us off, $7 trillion during COVID. And it's the same kind of thing that I think is going on now with this private equity scam. Okay, they need out. They need an exit strategy. So what better sitting there than people's 401ks, right? What better place to put Bitcoin than in people's 401ks? What better place to put it than in the corporate treasury, right? So again, I think they're setting the stage to do a big wealth and power transfer. And they're just, and 401ks are sitting ducks. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, but that's why I wanted Aaron to talk about Bitcoin, that they hype this thing as this great thing that's going to solve all the world's problems. And here's one of the foremost experts, Aaron, on this. And he's saying that's not the case at all. And so I'm trying to read between the lines and let people know, like, you got to watch out because they're coming for it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what kind of,
okay,
go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just saying, what kind of scam this is that you actually have companies that are being formed for the purpose of raising money from other people just to buy Bitcoin. And I want to tell you how absurd this is. The whole point of Bitcoin was that it was something you had in your own custody. There were no third parties. There are no banks, no governments. It's something to use. We're now several layers removed from that concept. Most people now never touch a Bitcoin. You have now people investing in a company, and then the company buys the Bitcoin, but the company doesn't even own the Bitcoin. The company actually is using another third party like Coinbase. So you're like 3 or 4 levels removed from the actual asset itself. And my opinion is that this is an opportunity for people who want to, I used to say that people that were early to Bitcoin looked at central bankers with disgust. And then I realized that no, they actually looked at them with envy. They want to become central bankers. They want to become the next elite. And so essentially these treasury companies are people that are trying to do just that. They're trying to get a big piece of the pie using other people's money, which I suspect in the end, they're just going to convert Bitcoin to other assets, not hold it indefinitely. The idea that you're going to hold Bitcoin indefinitely and that somehow the entire world is going to restructure. What's weird about it is though you even see these memes where it's a diagram. It's like a pyramid structure. It's the kind of structure that people, when they look at central banks and they look at the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and everything else and how society's developed, this is how they're glorifying Bitcoin. They'll say things like, well, if you have, 10 whole Bitcoin, then you're going to be at the very top. You're going to be living in a citadel completely separate from the rest of society. So they're really trying to re-architect the same structure, just with them on top. There's no moral difference or ethical difference at all.
What about the system that they're erecting right now with all this regulation, the Genius Act, the big beautiful bill, the executive orders, et cetera? Is this monolithic? I look at it as a monolith, but a monolithic financial system based on tokenization, tokens. Is this privately owned, or is it owned by the government, or what? Who's going to own it?
I think it's going to end up being owned by
Craig is cracking up.
The technocrat. It's going to be owned by the technocrats. It's going to be owned by the technocrats. But I'll tell you, it's funny when you look at this. I actually suggested that when you look at these stable coins, we're going to need to put together a book called The Creature from Epstein Island because of the way that this works. And just as one side note on this, so Howard Lutnick, who's now U.S. Commerce Secretary, who previously had no involvement in politics, in 2017, he negotiated a deal with Tether, which is the largest stablecoin on the planet. Mm. And, he invested $600 million, not as equity, it was a loan, a convertible loan, in exchange for being the exclusive manager of treasuries for Tether. Now, understand this, Tether has never passed an audit, and there was no requirement that Tether be backed by treasuries. And so even though they haven't passed an audit, they've claimed that they have 100,000 Bitcoin, they have tons and tons of gold. So they've been backing these Tether, not necessarily with treasuries, but this guy comes in and says, well, here's $600 million. I want the exclusive contract to manage the treasuries. Then he gets involved in politics, gets this position as the chair of the transition committee or whatever, which is a hugely important position, actually involved in the selection of the cabinet. And he was trying to angle to become the Treasury Secretary. So this is talk about, a scam on the level of Biden's or Clinton's. And then he helped push the Genius Act. So the single biggest beneficiary of the Genius Act is Howard Lutnick's firm, Cantor Fitzgerald, which is still run by his son, because they have the exclusive contract to manage the treasuries for the largest stablecoin issuer. And now because of the law, Tether is going to be forced to back their stablecoin by only treasuries. So whatever it is that they have backing Tether, they're going to now have to convert to treasuries, and Lutnick's firm benefits. So you're going to find when you go through all of this tokenization, it's the individuals involved, that a lot of the same players, Fink and so forth, that are the beneficiaries of all of it.
Speaking of Fink, let's not forget that back in, and I'll mention this in a second too, what's on the screen, but let's not forget back in 2018, Trump made BlackRock manager of the Treasury, which was a huge conflict of interest, and very few people talked about it at all. I would have thought people would be outraged by it. The whole Federal Reserve is was a literal conspiracy on Jekyll Island, right? As you were just alluding to, and it is not federal nor are there reserves. It's a complete sham. But you would think that people who know that would then be up in arms about this, and nobody really said. I think maybe two people that I can think of said much about it. I did a bunch of research on it back in 2018. Prior to my being aware of much of anything that was going on. I was very much in the dark back then, but that gave me chills. I just thought that was really, really terrifying. So Tether did invest in Rumble, $775 million into Rumble, and I just get a kick out of this. So people can take this information, do with it what they will, but the amount of shares that comes to was 103,333,333 shares. And that just kind of cracks me up because, they always signal with numbers. So I thought that was very interesting. But the other thing I wanted to bring up also, which I think is very relevant too, because you mentioned 2017. 2017 is actually when they did that study using humans to power, human heat for crypto mining. And, they've really downplayed this technology, saying it's not very efficient. But we've also had a lot of, some people call it predictive programming. The actual military term is operational preparation of the environment. And those who have seen any episodes of Black Mirror, right, where they're on the bike, literally powering everything. So it is kind of interesting when you start looking at things like MAHA, which RFK has said actually means MABA, Make America Biotech Accelerate. Yeah, here it is, cryptocurrency system using bodily activity. And this was so they have a patent on it. And this is this is the 0606 one. Yeah, that people were talking about, the Microsoft patent back in 2020, people were talking about. But even back in 2017, they were doing experiments on this. And they did have some success with it, and there have been more since then. There is talk of how this is kind of like I don't have the evidence to prove it, but there are people who are targeted individuals who have talked about them being part of this kind of an experiment. So people can do research on that due to the platform we're on. I won't go into too much more detail on that, but the research is out there for people to look further if they're interested. But then that kind of brings you to like Web3 technology. And when you ask like who's going to own it, certainly there's the Tethers, the Lutniks, the Finks, the Brock Pierce involved, all of those kind of characters. But when you look into Web3, and I think this is a really important conversation, it's being advertised, the marketing, their marketing is incredibly genius. They're masters of linguistics. They keep talking about how everything's going to be decentralized. Another buzzword is transparent. And certainly, as we know from Bitcoin or from any kind of blockchain, transparent is not necessarily a good thing because they keep talking about digital sovereignty. There is no such thing as transparent privacy. It's an oxymoron. You can't have both simultaneously. I'm not saying that there can't be decentralized options that are really positive and do empower the people and that do act as a bulwark against technocracy. I absolutely believe there are good, decent people who have the understanding of what we're up against, who are able to hopefully develop that kind of technology. But when they talk about decentralized, particularly when they're talking about Web3, everything becomes actually even more integrated than it is today. Because it becomes so much more interoperable. So when they talk about, like we're in the fourth industrial revolution, we keep hearing Klaus Schwab, he wrote the whole book on it. We hear this out of the World Economic Forum. We hear Yuval Noah Harari say this is when the year that things go under the skin. So all of these kind of terminology, but the fourth industrial revolution is really this is when we start to merge. It's the beginning of this integration moving into Web3. But they have a lot of the quote unquote experts, I put them in air quotes, they have said that we're actually already in Industry 5.0, which is the fifth industrial revolution. And when you look into the fifth industrial revolution, they start talking about how part of the problem with Web 2.0 is that we are siloed. And certainly that is a problem. We all recognize these problems. They're really great at pointing out problems that are accurate. I just, where we disagree and we diverge is on their solutions. I'm not so enthused by their solutions. But when they talk about how we are being siloed, they're saying that now this is going to be the solution to these silos, is everything's going to be interoperable. And the way that I think about it is like, it would almost be like taking your LinkedIn profile, how that has your whole resume and everything. And now that's interoperable on any platform. So you take the whole thing with you. So it is even more integrated than what we have now. So yeah, you're not necessarily in a silo, but you're definitely not achieving digital sovereignty as they keep advertising, and very much actually the opposite. And yes, it is decentralized, but it's centralized, but it becomes re-centralized, because how else is it going to be transparent and interoperable? And these are huge, huge problems that I think really need to be discussed and contended with. But I think that this putting leap into the other component too is, of course, they talk about how everything's agent centered. That's really code for your digital twin. So they talk about how you will have like a digital representation of you up on the internet that will be interoperable with every portal that you go into. They're talking about this in every sector. They're even talking about it in medicine. We heard, Larry Ellison from Oracle, when he announced the Stargate project, he talked about this. He didn't use the term, I don't believe, in the public announcement. He didn't use the term digital twin, but that is what he was alluding to. So I'm very, very concerned about it, because I think that Web3 is really where they have, they can really execute the full technocracy. And that's not to say there couldn't be benefits to Web3. I'm sure there are, but I'm very concerned about the control it gives them. I don't know if anybody has anything they want to say on that. People who might be more tech savvy than I am.
Well, let me just add one quick thing. Like, the thing that always frustrates me with the whole medical system is, HIPAA gets put in place, right? And digital records start to come in, and it's really a one-way flow, right? It all flows in one direction. They get all the data. What do we get back? We never get results like, oh, this is good for you. This is good. I mean, look at COVID, right? They did everything they could to cover everything up. So again, it's a one-way flow of information. They still can't tell us. I always laugh at this one. They still can't tell us whether red wine is good for us or not.
Yeah, it's true.
So the point is, I just think it's a one-way flow, and that's what that's where they're taking us, right? Is a one-way flow of information. Whether it's financial, same thing. One-way flow of information. Whether it's whatever, it's just a one-way flow of information. So it looked like Pat was going to. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I just want to say add to that, because it's not entirely just a one-way flow. It's a one-way control, like in terms of power. So it's really they have. It's a cybernetic feedback loop is what it is. So, and when you look, Patrick was reading the definition of technocracy. Well, right on that same page, they talk about how the purpose of the data collection is for surveillance, for control. And that's the only purpose of it. I'm paraphrasing. That wasn't their exact words, but that's essentially what they say. Yeah. And so when they're collecting all this data on us, it gives them the leverage. But it's not necessarily one way, because they are using the cybernetic feedback loops. So they're using it actually to program us without us even having an awareness that we are being programmed, that we are being, controlled, or we're being siloed, or we're being pitted against each other. And actually our very thoughts are being programmed through the data collection, through the feedback loop, because they're able to then target us using this kind of cognitive, epistemological, and psychological warfare. Landscape, which is even more concerning than just them collecting the data. But they are collecting it, and then they're beta testing us with it. So
yeah. I'd like to ask another question, off topic. Well, it's on topic, but off that topic. What do you think? We talked about Howard Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce. He was on national TV multiple times. January, maybe December, January, and even February, talking about the digitalization of all of our national assets, like the land that we have. the 558 or 550 million acres of land, and he looked into this into the off the camera, like looking into space, saying basically, "Ooh, if you could just imagine all these assets in the land and the minerals and the gold and all the oil. Why, if we could, Elon and me, if we could just get our hands on all that assets, if we could just make 0.25%, we'd have $1 trillion." He said this incessantly, laying claim. He didn't have at that point, but laying claim to the land assets that are owned by the United States of America. This is a huge asset for sure, because the government, they don't take it as an asset at this point. But if Lutnick's, especially what you said about his relationship with Tether, is Lutnick planning literally to digitize the assets of the United States like this? And what would that mean to the American people at that point? Will our national assets just fly out the window, or could they be usable? Not by us, I would think, but to somebody. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I'll defer. I'll just say this really quickly. The one thing that I'm really concerned about is, because this is such a sleight of hand, and we saw this with the natural asset companies that they tried to push through, is that people may think they own their land, but they don't have any controlling rights over it. And I could see them, like you were saying, land is very hard to steal, but if you tokenize it, then they may own the assets. And if they own the assets, they could have the controlling rights to the land that you live on. And we see this already. I mean, they were not successful. We were able to push back against the SEC, partnering with the New York Stock Exchange and putting natural asset companies into effect here in this country on the New York Stock Exchange. But there are lots of other places in the world where they already have these natural asset companies, so we can learn a lesson from them. And we also have in this country, we have these conservation easements. I was very involved in my own state trying to push back against them. My senator, who unfortunately passed away pretty recently, said that it was the reason that he got kicked out was because I kept screaming about these conservation easements. But through these conservation easements, for those who aren't familiar with the concept, essentially you could own your land, but they incentivize you through these tax credits. And so you could have a land trust that you inherited. I'm just going to give a hypothetical. There are many ways that this can be structured, by the way, but this is just one example. You could have a land trust that you inherited from, let's say, your great-grandparent, and they had a conservation easement on that land. You may not be aware of it, but that conservation easement, they can have through that conservation easement what are called ecosystem management services, and which give them controlling rights. So let's say your land is very oil rich and you want to drill on your land for either your own uses or for commercial uses. They can decide that that is not good for the environment and therefore you don't have the rights to, but then they could, and they could then profit off of your land. So they could have, imagine that, like imagine this is your home, you live there, and they decide you cannot have access to it. You can't drill on your own land, or you can't mine on your own land, or farm on your own land even. And then they decide that they want to, because they are better stewards of the environment than, of course, you are of your own land. And so under the guise of, stewardship of the planet, they're going to seize control and then profit as a result on your land. So I just imagine that, like, that's a pretty hard thing to really conceive, that you'd live on this land, have no control over it, and that somebody else could then go and drill on your land and then be profiting.
All right, guys, that's our broadcast for tonight. Fascinating, right? Please, if you appreciate all we're doing, don't forget to go to worldviewfoundation.com and make a contribution so we can keep pushing it out for free. This will be back up on demand tomorrow for free. As a broadcast service and ministry of Worldview Weekend Foundation. Don't forget, we also have our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. And our phone number, just text Melissa or leave a voicemail, and she'll get back to you and help you make a tax-deductible contribution over the phone. Hey, you know what else our foundation is doing? Go to last days. Well, that's not it. Last days study. Last days study.com. There we go. Lastdaysstudy.com. 48 one-hour lessons of my teaching on the book of Revelation, verse by verse. 48 1 hours. Or is it 47? 47. Logan, we need to put lesson 47 there. So that'd be lesson 47 there. 47 hours. Okay? And it's all free. Brought to you by our foundation. Now, we had these behind the paywall, but we brought them out as ministry, brought to you by our foundation. Because at some point, we just can't give everything away. Because we have to generate revenue somewhere to pay the bills. We got to bring in around $40,000 a month. That doesn't count my salary. And I got to make a living, pay my bills, my health insurance, my car insurance, my homeowner's insurance, everything like you guys do, my taxes. So we have to have ways to generate revenue. The vault's one way to do it. But the foundations come along and said, hey, we want to put these out there as ministry. And so we're working with our foundation to sponsor and keep these Sunday night church services open to the public for right now. So I hope you'll go there and study lastdaysstudy.com, lastdaysstudy.com. But remember, it's the foundation that makes these kind of ministry things available. So thank you for your support. All right. We really appreciate it. All right, roll the music, guys. Let's call it a night. Oh, by the way, why not go to worldviewstore.com and order a stack of these business cards? And they're free. They're free. Stack of business cards, double-sided printed. Pass them out and invite people to listen to the free broadcast service and ministry of Worldview Tube. Worldviewtube.com. Worldviewtube.com. All right? Thanks for doing that. And don't forget, our national conference is coming up. Get registered, worldviewstore.com. Until next time, I'm Brandon House. May God save America. Take care.
Faith, spiritual values, moral issues, government, economy, education, work, responsibility. What we think about these depends on our worldview. Now, VCY America presents Worldview Radio with Brandon House.
Guys, glad you're with us for this August 27th, 2025. We're going to be joined by Patrick Wood in just one moment to talk about several things. But first, we have to get to the tragic school shooting in Minneapolis, Minnesota this morning. I want you to tweet, text, email, Facebook, Getter, True Social, whatever it is you do. Tell them to turn on the VCY station in their market if they have one. Otherwise, vcy.org or worldviewtube.com. Because we are going to have a very important conversation today and try to connect some dots with what is going on with the Genius Act. President Trump, signed the Genius Act. And there seems to be a battle going on between the